Hello and welcome to a Hypnotic Authenticity podcast. This one is on the subject of mastering your emotional resilience, building your emotional strength so that when life throws you a curveball, you know how to deal with it. I'm not going to say that you will no longer be knocked off course. I think it's kind of part of the human condition that we live through unpredictable events which knock our emotions because our emotions are there as a valid reason to send us a message. But it's important to be able to rediscover the bedrock inside of you to kind of put yourself back on track rather than going through wild mood swings, I guess you might say. So I'm going to offer you a few short-term pick-me-ups, and then we're going to grapple with the more fundamental long-term aspects of how to build emotional resilience. So let's start with a few NLP tools, neuro-linguistic programming tools, that can help you in the moment shift your emotions. Now, there are loads of these tools, and they all will work if you intend for them to work, in actual fact. It's quite interesting. The problem, of course, is that when we go through emotionally tough times, it's very rare that we ever choose them. They come unexpectedly and they knock us off kilter. So if you don't have these tools there available in your toolbox in advance, it can be tricky to find the mental distance when you're already on the emotional roller coaster to discover them, let's say, to remember them, which is why it's useful to talk about them in advance. But if you are here listening to this because you have an immediate need, something very large and emotional is going on in your life, then I encourage you to try all of these techniques, because some of them will work better than others for you. And that's just the nature of the animal. So no matter how much it might hurt, try going through each of the different processes, and maybe each will compound the prior one. You'll get more value out of doing them all in any case. If you don't have something searing right now that wants to be fixed, if you just want to go along and understand the process, what I would suggest is if you just find something, an emotion, something that troubles you that kind of has an emotional magnetism to it. You kind of keep circling the drain on it, and you would like to feel differently. So if you can find an emotional issue like that, it doesn't have to be very powerful, something that annoys you or upsets you that you would like to feel differently about, and get that in your mind. And maybe you want to revivify the last time that you experienced that. That might help. But whichever of those two cases it is, what I would encourage you to do, and you're safe and you have the power to disconnect with this process at any point that you choose to do so. So just bring a sense of open-minded kindness and curiosity to what might happen. What I would suggest is, with that feeling, focus on the feeling and notice where you feel that feeling most strongly in your body. And maybe you can even kind of touch it. Maybe you can even put your hand on that part of your body. And having done that, ask yourself, whereabouts in particular is that feeling? And then what I'd like you to do, even if it sounds a little bit strange, build up a little bit of a relationship with that feeling. And I don't know how you represent things. A lot of people are visual, and so they can see, But some people, they just kind of get a felt sense for it. Whatever you go through is correct for you. But see if you can attach a color to the feeling. Maybe a texture. Maybe a temperature. Maybe it feels hot or cold. Maybe there's a movement to it. Maybe it's spinning or pulsing. Maybe it has a name. I don't know. But identify with whatever attributes of that feeling you can. Maybe you actually want to put it out in front of you so that you can metaphorically see it. Or maybe, you want to keep it wherever it is, but identify with it as much as you possibly can. And then I want you to engage with these 3 or 4 different ways of considering that feeling. So the first one is, once you've got that feeling, once you've discovered it in your body, once you've pointed to it, look at the color of it, or get a sense of the color of it in its current form, in its current state, however strong it may be, whatever depth of color you find. And keeping in mind how you would prefer to be feeling instead, strange though it may sound, ask the emotion, ask the color, what color it would need to feel better. Give yourself all the time in the world to receive the response back. And when you receive the response back, give it what it asks for. Bathe the emotion in the color that it needs, and notice what you notice. Send it all your kindness, all your love, and send it the color that it needs to feel better. Notice it permeating through every single part of that emotion, and notice what you notice. And try and find the old feeling and realize that you can't. That can be very quick and yet amazingly, amazingly powerful. Here's another one. So you found the feeling in your body. You know exactly where it is in your body. You've been able to identify a color, a shape, a texture, a movement, a temperature, maybe a name, whatever feels correct for you. And see if you can bring it out in front of you, wherever feels safe. So it might be a few centimeters in front of you, it might be 10 centimeters, it might be 30 centimeters, it might be a meter in front, wherever it feels safe, that feeling for you in this moment. And I want you just to observe it. And as you observe it, I wonder if you can notice a movement to that emotion. Give it time, almost as if you're giving it permission to communicate with you, to be whatever it is. And when you observe the movement, maybe there's a spinning, a rotation, just observe it with a completely open agenda. And when you notice it, and it's moving, actually physically with your hands, put your hands out as if you were going to manhandle, as if you were going to manipulate that emotion with your hands, and start to use the motion of your hands to move that emotion in the opposite direction to whichever way it's spinning. Do it gradually to start with. Maybe there's even a little bit of resistance, but you're on its side and you're doing what will make it feel better. So just allow that motion with your hands to gently begin with your imagination to slow down the momentum and to start turning it in the opposite direction. And when you notice that it's moving in the opposite direction, speed up your hands. make it move faster. Speed them up and up and up, faster and faster and faster, faster and faster and faster, until it's running on the opposite direction with its own momentum. You can actually take your hands away and it continues turning in that opposite direction, getting faster and faster and faster. And when you see that, take it and bring it back, put it back inside your body where it was before. And same thing, notice what you're noticing, try and find that old feeling and notice that it's gone. Wild. Just with the power of your imagination. A third one for you. So maybe if you want to listen to the podcast on separate days so that you can try each one in turn. You find the feeling that you would like to feel differently about. You discover it in your body. You find out whereabouts in particular it is in your body. You look for the color, the temperature, the texture, the movement, the name, the size, whatever feels right, and you put it out in front of you. And what I would suggest is that you put it as if it was living in a TV screen. So you can see it on the TV screen in 3D. You can watch it, and it's doing whatever it's doing. And I don't know what the TV looks like. Maybe it's a modern-looking TV. Maybe it's an archaic-looking TV. However it looks is absolutely fine. Maybe you're using a remote control. Maybe you're using little dials and buttons on the TV. But when it's established on the TV screen, what I'd like you to do is to put your hands around the two corners, so maybe the top right and the bottom left, or the top left and the bottom right, and I want you to first of all move the television towards you and see how that feels. And then move it back. All with your imagination, but doing it with your hands. And then what I'd like you to do is to take the corners with your hands and stretch the screen outwards. So you're pulling it out with both hands so the TV screen's getting wider and wider, larger and larger. And notice what happens. And then put it back to the size that it was before. Now, if you're like me, what happens is when you bring it closer, the feeling gets stronger. When you make it larger, the feeling gets stronger. And then you put it back to how it was. Some people, it's not like that. Some people, when they make it larger, it kind of dissipates. It spreads out. And so the feeling is less. Whichever is right for you is right for you. It's perfectly okay. But the point is to work out which one makes it stronger. And therefore, by definition, you have the power to make it weaker. So whichever one is right for you to make it weaker, for me, it would be to start compressing the screen. So I'm squeezing the screen and making the screen smaller and smaller, smaller and smaller, smaller and smaller, smaller and smaller, until it's the size of a matchbox, until it's the size of a postage stamp. And then I can literally put it on my hand and flick it off beyond the horizon. And again, notice how you feel. Or you may want, with the TV screen as it is, before you move it down in size, you want to take the remote control or turn the buttons, the dials, and take all of the color out of the picture. Turn that little dial all the way to the left, and maybe that makes it black and white, or maybe it makes it all white, or maybe it makes it all black, whatever feels correct for you. But then squeeze the picture down, squeeze the TV down, down and down and down, matchbox, postage stamp, flick it off into the distance, and notice how you feel. Now, these are all tools of the imagination. There's nothing magic going on, but it feels magic. It feels like you have regained a sense of control over something that only a few minutes ago appeared to be ruling your emotions. And that, I think, in itself can be very powerful, even though it's only a short-term issue. Now, one of the things which are interesting about emotions is that apparently most emotions have the kind of ebb and flow. Most emotions, in actual fact, we don't choose, we observe them. They just come up and then we notice them. But they'll tend to disappear again. They'll tend to go away within 20 seconds, 30 seconds. So if this emotion is something which is long-standing, which you've been harboring for a few days or longer, It might be worth asking yourself if there is a benefit to feeling that way, because it's almost as if you are feeding it, you're putting wood on the fire and rekindling an emotion which of its own accord, with its usual essence, would simply dissipate. So that can be useful. Another way that might be useful, which is different from that NLP perspective, but also uses the power of your imagination, I've done a podcast on boundaries. Now, boundaries are a fictitious, metaphorical structure that we create inside our mind of our own boundary, of our sphere of influence. Inside the boundary is everything that we hold dear to us, over which we have some degree of control. Right in the center of us are the things that are important to us, that we have a lot of control over. And then as you go out, you're getting to the things which are important to you, but you have less control over. And then at the border of your boundary, at that wall, is that frictional area where you've got next to no influence at all. And then outside your boundary are the things that, well, maybe you still are interested in them, they're still important to you, but you have absolutely no influence over. Or actually, they're things that you don't really think about and you have no influence over. So as a simple example, inside your boundary are your feelings, your thoughts, your goals, your wishes, your core values. Outside your boundary are things like what other people think and say and do. Completely outside of your boundary, they're going to do what they do. Even if it's important to you, they're still going to choose what they choose. And then to notice when this emotion is with you, this strong emotion that you would like to feel differently about, where does it sit? Does it sit within your boundary or outside your boundary? And where should it be sitting? If, as a simple example, your emotions have been knocked off kilter because somebody else has done something or not done something or said something or not said something, acted in some way, well, they're going to do what they do because they are outside of your boundary. But your emotions are inside your boundary. And you might want to actually go through an imaginary process of noticing where that emotion sits and bring it inside your boundary. Imagine that that boundary is porous, that you can roll things in and out. And so you can bring that emotion inside where it's safe, where it's secure. Similarly, while you're there, you might notice some things that are inside your boundary that actually don't belong there, that you're expending a massive amount of energy over, but that are basically outside of your control. And you might want to push those out beyond your boundary. It brings you a sense of composure. It brings you an ability to find a place of peace somewhere inside of you. So that can be very helpful when you're emotionally triggered as well. But the best for me is that you learn from the pain, okay? If you have a motto for life, if you have a motivation in life, if there is a gleaming, shining why as to your place in the world, then this is much easier, because then you can look at the pain from that perspective. Maybe you don't know what your gleaming, shining why is. But if not, maybe you can come with a sense of curiosity, of learning. You see, the thing is, when things are challenging, when they're uncomfortable, when they're painful, we didn't ask for that. We didn't choose it. It just appears, and typically we're caught off guard by it. It's a shock, and we don't know what to do. But pain multiplied by resistance creates suffering. Pain in itself is kind of inevitable. Sometimes there's going to be painful things that occur. You can breathe into pain, but when you resist, then you suffer. And there is an enormous gap between pain and suffering. And so rather than resisting, if you can lean into the feeling, even accepting that it's not a nice feeling, but inside your boundary, bathing it in love, bathing it in kindness, and owning your experience and asking yourself, is there anything that I can learn from this? Anything. Even if it's just, well, I'll never put myself in that circumstance again. There's usually something good that you can take from a painful situation. And if so, it can help the process of kind of diffusing the pain. Another way that you could bring to it is, well, look, I have just been triggered. I'm now running off on this railway, helter-skelter. Well, it turns out everybody does that. Everybody is running on their own rails. Other people are not thinking about you and your feelings to the same extent that you are. They are motivated by their own motivations. They're running on their own rails. Most of it is running on complete autopilot. And you just happen to be a victim of what it is that they think right now is the right thing to do or say or be. It's not the same as saying that what they did is acceptable, and it's not to say that what they did is good or right or anything like that. And we're not talking about forgiveness here, but what we're saying is other people are simply going to do what they're going to do, and the power that you have is in choosing your response to that. It's not in whether or not they do something. And there's no point in blaming yourself for what other people do, because they're doing it based on their own perspectives, not on yours. You can look at things like Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl, and Edith Eger's book, The Choice. Very, very good ways of being able to deal with the most excruciating of circumstances by understanding what is within your control, what is a choice, and what actually is completely, unfortunately, outside of your control. End result is, if you can learn something from a uncomfortable or painful or upsetting situation, well, maybe you can see a benefit to it from you. I know personally that some of the most painful experiences that I've had in my life that I would not wish upon my worst enemy have made me the person I am. So weirdly, I would not wish to have not gone through them, even though they were dreadful experiences. I am grateful for the me that came out the other side, that wouldn't have come out the other side had it not been for those experiences, curiously. And at the same time I say that, part of me wishes, of course, none of it had ever happened, but at the same time I kind of am what I am because of all of these experiences that I can kind of look back on throughout the whole of my life that have brought me to today. So if you can do that with your experience, it can take the sting out of the tail. I guess what we're talking about there is being able to accept that sometimes in life, whether we choose to or not, we're going to end up outside of our comfort zone. But that is where we discover so much about ourselves, because it's not our habitual place of being. It's not where our habits are occurring. It's when new things happen. And sometimes outside our comfort zone, good things happen. And sometimes, unfortunately, bad things happen. But they're all happening new and different. And we get feedback from that, which we are also unprepared for, so we learn about ourselves. So even in very, very tricky situations, weirdly, you can feel very alive, if that makes sense. And I'm not trying to diminish anybody's pain. I'm just saying that within that, it's a little bit like the forest that regenerates itself after it's burned and been razed to the ground. There's always some opportunity, some goodness, if you look for it in the pain, in the tragedy, in what you begin by labeling as bad. So you can effectively start to look at things in a different way. Once you can appreciate that getting outside of your comfort zone is where all your personal growth comes from, well then weirdly you can have a sense of gratitude for all the unexpected weird stuff that happens in life, some of which is good, some of which is bad. And that can be very freeing. It can actually generate a sense of deep, settled joy inside of you because you're not pushing against any of it. You're owning it and coming to conclusions around it, kind of based around your powerlessness. You kind of understanding what you are, what you're capable of, and what you're not. Here's another one that you might find of interest. This is from Roman and Greek times, Stoical approach. So the Stoics, what they used to do, or some of them at least, we generalize about the Stoics, and in actual fact, they were all very individual people. But one of the threads that comes out of it is this cynical approach, which is basically constantly considering what can go wrong, so that you are habituating yourself to disappointment, to things that will inevitably go wrong at times that you least expect it. So the more that you do that, well, when it occurs, it's not so shocking. It's not so scary. It's like, oh, here we are. I've been planning for this. So you can rehearse what can possibly go wrong. It builds resistance, builds resilience. Because the opposite demands massive amounts of willpower at a time when you are vulnerable, at a time when you're weak, a time when you've been knocked off kilter. And one of the things that we know about willpower is that it is a finite quantity that gets used up. So you can't simply rely on your willpower to push on through day after day, week after week. That's where burnouts come from. You simply don't have the depth of energy to use to create and sustain ongoing will in the face of adversity. The way to do it is to look at the adversity and see the good in the bad and reframe what it is, so that rather than pushing against, you're leaning into and being thankful for the fact that you're here, that life is a rich, extraordinary thing, and that stuff happens and it's not your fault. Or even if it is your fault, even if you can feel your own sense of responsibility for certain things, well, when you took those decisions at the time you were being a member of the human race, you kind of made the best decision you could at the time, knowing that everybody runs on their own rails, and so do you, and most of this is subconscious, and so on and so forth. But that there's no point in looking back with hindsight from today to whatever caused your upset to occur, because at the time that wasn't there. And if you went back really to the time before, well, you would do the same thing, because at that time it felt right to you. So there's lots and lots of ways of relativizing and getting on your own side so that you can be kind to yourself. The only way that you can pick yourself up from an emotionally challenging situation is knowing where you are and setting an intention to go somewhere else. So you can't resist that. That will just distance you from beginning the process. The thing to do is to understand and own the process. You can use those short-term tricks that I mentioned as a way of light relief, let's say, of diluting the feeling sometimes. But if it's a strong problem, then obviously the feeling is going to come back, and the way to stop that is by dealing with it, by integrating it, by understanding it, by thanking it, by forgiving anybody that you need to forgive, or forgiving yourself, or deciding that the pain is going to stay with you, but that you are going to live for a greater reason than that, whatever it may be. But to own it and then choose the direction that you're going to go. And bit by bit, day by day, live by that value. Sometimes in the most tricky situation, we discover our why. We discover the reason for what we are. We discover the germ of truth, the essence of everything we stand for inside the pain. Anyway, I hope some of that might be of interest to you. I hope it might be useful, fruitful, sustaining. Because once you understand this about yourself, then when things occur in the future, they aren't frightening. They occur, they can be horrid, but you know how to deal with them. You have a set of tools and a set of standards and values and understandings about what it is to be you as an individual that gives you a bedrock, that gives you a pillar of strength that you don't even need to show off to anybody else, that you just know in your heart, in your core, is part of what you are. And so whilst you might get swayed by the wind of life, you remain anchored at your core to and with yourself. And you can find a place inside of you that feels like home, no matter what goes on elsewhere. So thank you for listening. I hope that's of interest. If it is, subscribe. I've got many videos, and the number of podcasts is now also increasing. And hopefully some of them will be particularly useful to you. And some of them will probably be absolutely useless. And that's the nature of the beast. Thank you for listening. And if you have any thoughts or comments, leave them down below. I'd be really, really pleased to help. Cheers. Bye-bye.